Welcome to the Storytelling with Data podcast, where listeners around the world learn to be better storytellers and presenters. We'll cover a wide range of topics that will help you effectively show and tell your data stories. So get ready to separate yourself from the mess of 3D exploding pie charts and deliver knockout presentations. And with that, here's Cole.
Hi, Cole here. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a while since I've sat down on my own to record, much to my husband/producer's dismay. And that's been primarily due to two reasons. First, I've been pretty busy since the publication of Daphne Draws Data in September, visiting schools. I was actually just at one this morning, doing interviews for other people's podcasts. And my time on the work front outside of that has been mainly spent focusing on the next book, which we'll share more about soon. The other reason that there hasn't been a new episode lately is because I tend to do them when inspiration strikes, when I have an idea that hits me and the energy to act on it. And I'm not sure about you, but when I'm busy and said energy is pretty fully consumed between work and life, it doesn't leave a lot of room for creative inspiration. However, there are still moments. One thing that's fascinating about the human brain is our ability to ruminate. And I've always found it interesting how it seems like the best ideas strike when we aren't necessarily looking for them. This happens to me, and from the conversations I've had and reading I've done on the topic, I'm not alone. It's quite common that good ideas often come when we're doing something mundane that's taking some attention, but not super active attention. For example, while taking a shower, going for a run, brushing your teeth. Or yesterday, the idea for this podcast came to me while driving in the car. It didn't come totally out of nowhere. During our team meeting earlier in the week, we talked about how it's been a while since we've put out an episode. So that was in the back of my mind. Then I had a conversation with one of my colleagues the following day about design and lent her a couple of books to borrow. Somehow, these two conversations connected when I wasn't actively thinking about either of them. And that generated the idea. But an idea on its own isn't enough. To turn that into something, we have to then act upon it. So I sent myself an email with the topic so I wouldn't forget. And when I got back to my desk, I sketched out some notes for how I'd frame things and structure the episode. That's actually what I'm looking at right now as I transition into what I'd like to talk about today: everyday design and how it can inform how we visually design our graphs and slides. I share this prelude as a reminder to appreciate these small but powerful moments. I think we sometimes fool ourselves into thinking we need a big block of time or space to generate ideas. But when the conditions are right, some of that space already exists during our day and can be used for this, provided, that is, that we pay attention to the ideas and do something with them. I mentioned the conversation I had with my colleague earlier this week. Caitlin is our newest team member. She joined in September and is focused on building awareness about Daphne Draws Data, particularly among educators. We've had to design a few things as part of this: bookmarks, ads for a couple of magazines. As you might suspect, I have pretty strong feelings when it comes to how these things look. I expect super high attention to detail, a nice aesthetic layout, and for things to be on brand. We were talking about some edits, and Caitlin said something to me like, "I'm working on this, but I'm not a designer. I'm not really good at design. I don't have a great eye for it," which I think is nonsense. Now, she's certainly not the first person to have said this or the only person to feel this way. I call it nonsense because we all know good design when we experience it, and poor design when we're frustrated by it. It can be useful to take the time to notice when we encounter either lovely or lacking design in the world around us and think about what we might learn from it to inform how we visually design our graphs and communications. I'm almost always paying attention to the design, noticing the good and the not so good. I'll share with you some examples that come to mind and some that I've paid special attention to since I started planning to talk about this topic. By calling these out and drawing parallels to the visual design of information, I imagine that you might pay more attention and learn from the design of everyday things, too. Let's start with one of my favorite everyday examples. Opening a door. I think everyone has likely experienced this at one point or another, where you go to open a door and you try it the wrong way first. You push when you're meant to pull, or vice versa. Interestingly, people tend to blame themselves for this. Silly me, I can't even open a door. When really, this is a failure of design. The designer prioritized something else over the affordance. And affordance is something about the design that indicates how the object is meant to be used. In the case of a push-pull door, for example, a push plate or bar affords pushing. It's the visual and physical cue that we're meant to push on the door. And a handle affords pulling. And the scenario in which these are mixed up or positioned in a way that makes it unclear or lacking altogether is what leads to our mistake. If we translate this scenario to the visual design of graphs, affordances can play an important role here as well. Interestingly, the same phenomenon I described with the door often plays out with poorly designed dataviz too. When the audience or reader doesn't immediately understand what they're looking at, they blame themselves. I'm not a numbers person. I'm not good with graphs. And to that, I say, phooey. It's not their fault. The blame goes to the designer of the information for not making how to use it clear. This is a failure of design where the visual cue, the affordance, wasn't obvious. Just as the door failed to guide you, poorly designed graphs can fail their audiences by not making how to read them obvious. When it comes to design affordances we can use with our graphs, we can title and label so there's clarity of information and no one's confused about what they're looking at. We can make it obvious what to see by stating it simply in words with a takeaway title, and indicate where to look through sparing color or other means of intentional contrast to direct attention. Another example where design can make things super easy or annoyingly difficult, packaging. If you've ever had the pleasure of opening an Apple product, you've hopefully taken a moment to appreciate it. The packaging is sleek and modern. I think it's usually bright white, so it looks really clean, and it's made of a material that feels nice, sort of satiny to the touch. It's clear in what order to open things. Nothing rips unnecessarily. Things seem to slide around seamlessly until your product is revealed. And it's also beautiful. Counter that with a recent experience I had opening a Barbie doll for my daughter. Everything was encased in plastic. I had to roughly rip or cut the cardboard backing to get into the package. Once inside, Barbie was secured by what seemed like a totally unnecessary number of elastic and plastic bands and ties, some nearly impossible to get off without cutting the doll or myself in the process. On this note, you may have noticed that sometimes Amazon lists an option for a product with frustration-free packaging. I think there's even usually a price difference. Pay more to not be frustrated. In data visualization, we want to make the experience seamless. Just like Apple's packaging invites you in with clean design, clear labeling, intuitive structure, our graphs should guide our audience effortlessly to insights. This reminds me of a question that I've been asked a number of times over the years. Do I need to make it look pretty? Is there value in making a graph look nice or a slide aesthetically pleasing? I'd say pretty for the sake of pretty, no. But there is value in aesthetics, in making something look nice. In fact, studies have shown that when someone believes that time and energy was spent on the design of something, they're more likely willing to spend time with it and overlook design flaws. This implicit contract that we can create by being thoughtful about the design of our visual communications is definitely something I'd recommend that we use to our advantage. If you feel unsure how to make things look nice, a few things to pay attention to are stylistic choices like color and font and structural components. For the latter, it really starts with attention to detail. Aim for clean vertical and horizontal alignment of elements. Separate things with white space. Allow there to be margins that are free of clutter. For the stylistic choices, if these aren't set for you through company branding or templates and you don't trust yourself, look for examples to emulate. When you see a good graph or slide, pause and reflect on what makes it work and how you might make use of similar ideas. Do the same when you encounter a confusing or otherwise not ideal graph or slide. Consider what issues exist and how you can avoid them in your own work. By the way, a great place to see a lot of example graphs and slides is in our online Storytelling with Data community. You can explore users, galleries, and by the way, we're getting ready to launch the ability to follow other community members so you can stay up to date when people you follow post new things. Also put your attention to the monthly Storytelling with Data challenge. It's a great way to see a lot of example graphs and dataviz. I'll link to that in the show notes. Let's take a quick break. When I return, I'll compare one of my favorite and a faux kitchen tool.
If you are looking to take the next steps in crafting effective presentations, join me, Simon Rowe, and fellow data storyteller Amy Esselman this January on our ever-popular 8-week course. We'll be immersing ourselves in the world of storytelling with data through live weekly lectures, synthesized exercises, and a final project presentation, all with individual feedback provided in office hour sessions, including European-friendly times. Spaces are limited and going fast. For more details, check out storytellingwithdata.com/public workshops and use the code podcast10 for 10% off registration. Here's to your next stellar presentation.
Welcome back. Let's turn next to product design and discuss another example I've touched on before, kitchen devices. In my first book, Storytelling with Data, I wrote about the OXO brand of kitchen tools. They used to have a slogan or catchphrase that was something like, "Tools you pick up." Or at least I think they did. When I was trying to search online, I was having trouble finding it. Though I did jot down the first sentence on their About page, which reads, "At OXO, we look at everyday objects and activities, and we see ways to make things simpler, easier, more thoughtfully designed, better." One of my personal favorites of theirs is the avocado slicer. It's bright green, which makes it super easy to find in the drawer. You can cut, pit, and scoop out the flesh of the avocado all with a single, super easy to use tool. It's intuitive. Even my kids love it. I'll contrast that with our can opener. My husband bought it recently because he wanted one that doesn't leave a sharp edge on the lid. So it's meant to trim the entire lid away. I like that in theory. However, he's shown me how to use it multiple times, and I can still never get it to work. I actually hid our old can opener in the back of the miscellaneous kitchen tool drawer, and it's the one I dig out when I need to open a can. In the case of the avocado slicer, the gratifying design experience, it wins on two fronts: ease of use and, as a result of that, utility. The can opener is awkward and difficult to use, so I just don't use it. When we're creating graphs to communicate to others, we certainly want that OXO experience. We want the graph to be easy to use and for our audience to actually use it. This is one of the reasons that we advocate for simple, common graphs for business communications. There are a trusted few that we find ourselves reaching for again and again with our clients. Mostly bar charts and line graphs with the occasional dot plot, slope graph, or scatter plot, and every once in a while, something more specialized. And the goal is never to oversimplify, but rather to not make things more complicated than they need to be. One great resource when it comes to learning more about basic graphs and also some twists and less common but occasionally useful varieties is the Storytelling with Data chart guide, which I'll link to in the show notes. As I record this, we are squarely in the holiday season. Yesterday, I picked up new Christmas wrapping paper. This is another product that has quite the design spectrum, and I'm not even talking about the decorative design, but rather the physical design, the look, the feel, and performance. Perhaps you've cut through one of the great examples before. The paper feels almost like satin, but it's thick, yet scissors slide through cleanly, almost like you're cutting air. On the other end of the spectrum, the scissors seem to choke on the paper, making a jagged cut or even ripping as the paper catches and snags in their blades. When it comes to data visualization, the spectrum of design is much like that of wrapping paper. On one end, there are graphs and slides that feel polished and effortless, like that high-quality wrapping paper that glides under scissors. These are the visualizations where every element serves a purpose. The graph type is thoughtfully chosen, clutters minimized, and the design aligns with the audience's needs. The result is a seamless experience where the data's story comes through clearly and effectively, almost as if the graph disappears and the insights speak for themselves. On the other end are visualizations that feel more like that frustrating, low-quality paper. Hard to work with, and even harder to interpret. These might include cluttered slides with too many elements competing for attention, confusing graph types that make the audience work to understand the data, or colors and fonts that detract or distract rather than support. Just as the poor design of wrapping paper can lead to a frustrating experience, poor data design leaves the audience struggling to cut through the noise to find the message. The key lesson here is intentional design. Just as we might choose the right wrapping paper for a special gift, we should design our graphs and slides with care, choosing what fits the data, the message, and the audience. When we focus on clarity, simplicity, and purpose, we create visuals that feel satisfying to interpret. Speaking of wrapping paper, the Storytelling with Data holiday gift shop is now open. You can delight someone on your list with some of our favorite Storytelling with Data treasures, from signed books and a charming, huggable plush data drawing dragon to fun and functional office swag. Our shop's full of special finds for the special people in your life. You can visit storytellingwithdata.com/shop and use the code podcast10 at checkout for 10% off. Another parallel I've drawn before when it comes to the design of physical objects and the visual design of graphs and slides involves the trusty Swiss Army knife. Now, don't get me wrong, Swiss Army knives are impressive in their versatility. They combine a corkscrew, a screwdriver, scissors, and sometimes more into a single compact tool. But here's the thing. When you need to open a bottle of wine, would you rather use the corkscrew from a Swiss Army knife or a well-designed ergonomic corkscrew? When something tries to do many things, it doesn't do any of them particularly well, or at least not as well as a tool that's designed specifically for the job. This same concept can be applied to data visualization. The Swiss Army knife of the dataviz world is the stacked bar chart. It tries to do it all, showing part-to-whole relationships, comparisons across categories, sometimes even trends over time, all in a single graph. But because it's doing so much, it often falls short, leaving the audience stuck trying to interpret too much at once. By breaking it into multiple purpose-driven visuals, we can make the data easier to interpret, just like using the right tool for a specific task. In other words, it's usually better to break the stacked bar chart into multiple, simpler graphs, each designed to do one thing well. For example, if you're showing a part-to-whole relationship, a simple bar chart or even a pie chart might work better. If you're comparing across categories, grouped bar charts can be clearer. And if you're looking at trends over time, a line graph is usually going to do the best job. By using the right tool for the situation, you create visuals that are easier to interpret and allow your audience to focus on the story the data is telling. Just like with physical tools, the best graph is the one that's purpose-built for the specific message you want to communicate. I recently asked people on X for examples of everyday situations where design can make something either disappointing or delightful. One response stood out to me, and it was about speed bumps. The person noted that people's reactions to unexpectedly encountering a speed bump can be quite funny, as long as no damage is done. And it's a perfect example of how design can catch us off guard in unexpected ways. Speed bumps, when poorly designed or unmarked, can lead to surprise, discomfort, even damage. When they're thoughtfully designed, on the other hand, clearly marked and appropriately placed, they serve their purpose without causing any unnecessary distress. Similarly, a poorly designed graph can catch your audience off guard, making them slow down or stumble as they try to interpret it. If a graph surprises your audience in a way that's jarring or confusing, whether through poor labeling, clutter, or unclear purpose, it disrupts the experience. But when the design is intentional and well thought out, the audience feels guided, not frustrated. I mentioned that I've been paying special attention to design since I decided to focus on this topic. From just this morning, there were a few moments that caught my attention. My hair conditioner is in a small tub that has a lid that you have to unscrew. The tub is small, but it's quite wide, which makes the lid too large for me to get a good grip on, particularly if my hands are wet. I find it frustrating pretty much every time I try to open it. It's simply too big for my hand. If we apply this idea to visual communications, this is similar to making text too small. Always make the text on a slide or page bigger than you think it needs to be. Assume that not everyone's eyesight is as good as yours. When the lid's too big for my hand or the text is too small for my eyes, I can force it, stretch my hand in uncomfortable ways, or squint so I can make out the letters. But don't make me do this. Don't make it feel like work. I had another frustrating try to get it open moment with my vitamins. My vitamin D is in a bag that seals like a Ziploc, only with a whole lot more stick-together force. It's nearly impossible to open. I need to find a different container for it, and I definitely won't order this brand again. This is another example of why we want to avoid frustrating our audiences. When we do, they may look elsewhere for solutions. To counter these negative experiences, I also had a nice one. There's a brand of makeup and skincare products that I like. Last holiday season, they offered a limited edition exotic and marine animal design across some of their products. And I realize hearing myself say this that it sounds strange, but they're beautifully designed. And while picking up a gift for a friend, I decided to treat myself and bought a powder case that is this metallic marine blue-green with a jellyfish on it, and a brush to go with it that has a gold handle with a crimson snake wrapped around it. They're stunning, and they make me happy every single time I use them. That is what I suggest we aim to do through the way that we design. Create delight. Just thinking back over the examples we've talked about today, a lot of it boils down to the feelings that you want your audience to have. When it comes to our graphs and slides, we might set out to evoke feelings of ease and the confidence in our audience that they're looking at things the right way. To achieve that, we should be intentional and thoughtful in our design. And we can use the lessons from all sorts of experiences we encounter in the world around us to better understand the ways in which we can do this. When this happens, when we design our dataviz well, people don't really pay much attention to the graph. Instead, they focus on the information, what it means, how to use it, what to do next. The conversations become less about the data, the graph, the slide, and more about the actions to take, the decisions to be made, and what it means in the broader context of the business. Like any good design, when it's done well, and if you're not looking for it, you may not even notice it. I suspect, though, as a result of this episode, if you haven't already, you may start noticing the design of everyday things, which, by the way, is the title of a book on design that I highly recommend for those interested in learning more. It was among the titles I mentioned that I lent to Caitlin. The Design of Everyday Things is by Don Norman. I'm also a fan of The Universal Principles of Design by Lidwell et al. And Susan Weinshank's 100 Things Every Designer Needs to Know About People. I'll link to all of those in the show notes. I encourage you to take these lessons from everyday designs and bring them into your own work. Thoughtful design isn't just about aesthetics, it's about creating clarity and connection. Before I close, a couple of quick updates. First, a reminder that the Storytelling with Data holiday shop is open. Visit storytellingwithdata.com/shop for unique and personalized gifts for the data enthusiasts on your shopping list. Order today to ensure delivery before the holidays. Use the code PODCAST10 at checkout. That's PODCAST10 for 10% off. We have just one public virtual workshop left this year, and it takes place on December 16th. There are a few spots still available. You can claim yours at storytellingwithdata.com/workshops. Speaking of online learning, the next cohort of our highly acclaimed 8-week online course begins in January. Data storytellers Simon and Amy will take you through the world of storytelling with data, curating a multimedia learning journey anchored in core storytelling with data lessons that are expanded upon and explored through weekly lectures, reading, videos, podcasts, exercises, and a course project. Space is limited and filling up quickly. You can learn more and register at storytellingwithdata.com/course and use the code PODCAST10 for 10% off the registration fee. For those planning even further ahead, our full 2025 public workshop schedule has been posted. We'll be hosting an in-person one-day session with the entire Storytelling with Data team in London and New York City, as well as virtual half-day workshops throughout the year. Details and registration at storytellingwithdata.com/workshops. If you like to learn via video, check out our growing library on the Storytelling with Data YouTube channel. You'll find tips, tutorials, dataviz makeovers, presentation strategies, and more. Visit storytellingwithdata.com/YouTube. Finally, if you haven't already, be sure to join our free online Storytelling with Data community, where you can practice through our monthly challenge and exercise bank, exchange feedback, and be inspired. We also offer a premium subscription, which includes weekly office hours, live events, early access, special offers, and we have a super exciting new perk coming in the new year. Our premium community members will be the first to know. You'll find all of that at community.storytellingwithdata.com. This and the other links I've rattled off here can be found in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please write a review or share with a friend. Happy holidays from me and the entire team here at Storytelling with Data.